Burnley are back in the Premier League. They sealed the deal with that win over Sheffield United on Easter Monday. We were watching on a watch along on the channel here. So let's take a deep dive into how they did it. Apologies, it's been a very busy week post bank holiday, and this is the first chance. I said I was going to do it, and here I am doing it. We are going to start over there on the 11th of May 2024 with Burnley's relegation back down to the Championship, and in yo-yoing fashion, it's the most recent relegation. Obviously, ended the Sean Dyche era, brought them down into the Championship. Vincent Kompany then took them back up, and here is the end of his first season in the Premier League, another relegation, which means, and we have to talk about it, and it's hard to have a sensible conversation about it because fans of Burnley will probably want to minimise it, fans of everybody else will want to maximise it, but Burnley obviously come into the Championship with a year one parachute payment, which puts them kind of there in the hierarchy of Championship teams. Okay, they're still there in the hierarchy of English football, but it is a significant thing. And the expectation for a team, a year one parachute team, is that they are at least in the promotion race or indeed getting promoted. People will bring up the example of Luton. Luton, very different to a lot of other parachute teams in that they come from the National League and they're buying a new stadium. And they didn't come down having invested hundreds of millions in a squad of players and assets. Burnley had, over many years in the Premier League and the kind of reset in the Championship, and then a fair bit of spending under Vincent Kompany actually after they'd gone up. Obviously, I'm talking relative to the Championship, not to the Premier League, because that's the division they are in for this deep dive video. They're not going to do it, though, with Vincent Kompany, and I've got my head-scratchy look for you now, because a lot of people, me included, were rather surprised that Vincent Kompany took a really, really elite job at Bayern Munich in Germany, and talk about the expectations of a year one parachute team in the Championship. The expectations of Bayern Munich in Germany, you're expected to win the league every season and be right at the sharp end of the Champions League. Nice job to get when you've only been a manager for 2 seasons. One of them was in the Championship and one of them was a relegation from the Premier League. Look, it's not the topic of this video, but Vincent Kompany, obviously a giant kind of the Premier League with his work as a centre-back for Manchester City, but pretty good gig. Felt like when Lampard went out of Derby and got the Chelsea job, you're kind of like, wow, you can't really say no to that. And obviously through contractual reasons, Burnley couldn't say no and took their compensation. Vincent Kompany went out on the 29th of May, and a fair wee while later, Scott Parker came in, and this is the first thing we can compare and rather not contrast with the Leeds example. A team relegated from the Premier League and they go for a safe pair of hands that knows how to get promoted. And indeed, like Daniel Farke, Scott Parker has actually been promoted out of the Championship twice already prior to this third promotion with Burnley. He's had good jobs, hasn't he? With parachute teams in Fulham. He took them up via the playoffs, and in Bournemouth, that was a year 2 team, took them up automatically. He knows the ropes. I was thinking about this. Hopefully, this doesn't just become so simplistic for the parachute teams that all they need to do is get somebody who's done it before and it guarantees them promotion. Obviously, we do have the example the season before where who was promoted? Maresca, McKenna, and Martin, all the M's. None of them had been promoted before. So far this season, both managers who have gone up have been promoted. Could we get more? Wilder has been before, hasn't he? Lampard hasn't. Manning hasn't. Labrise hasn't. Carrick hasn't. Maybe we'll get another. Alex Neil has. Hey, he's the Millwall manager. Maybe they get in the playoffs. Anyway, I digress. Scott Parker. Again, talk about not being able to have a sensible conversation about teams in receipt of parachute payments. It's hard to have a sensible conversation about famous football players who become managers at a level lower than they used to play at. I think people really struggle to cope with the likes of Rooney and Lampard and Parker, etc., coming down and managing in the Championship. They're very, very triggered by it. And I don't know what it is. I don't know why it is, but it happens. And a lot of suspicion around Scott Parker. And I have to say, from both Fulham fans and Bournemouth fans, I would hear often promoted in spite of Parker. But should we focus on the key word there? Promoted twice. So, read into it what you will. The stats and the record at championship level of Scott Parker is, I don't know what word to use. It's extraordinary now. 3 seasons, 3 promotions, bish, bash, bosh. Yes, with the caveat, he had parachute payments with all of his team. In he comes. Can he do it again? Spoiler alert, he's going to do it again. That's probably why you clicked on the video, isn't it? Right, let's delve into the season. And on the opening day, don't worry, I'm not going to go blow for blow. It was Luton 1, Burnley 4, 2 newly relegated teams. But not really interested in the match. I'm interested in a match day squad. Because take a guess, how many players in the Burnley 20 are still at the club? Or actually, let's reverse that. How many players of the Burnley 20 have left the club? Click pause, have a little guess, write it in the comments. And I will tell you right now that of that squad from the opening day, O'Shea, Vitinho, Odebear, Zaruri, Veghorst, Masengo, McNally, Twine, Huntondui, okay, he's out on loan, and Rodriguez, 10, let me get in the middle of the shot, have left. So, again, with year one parachute teams, often, yes, they're able to have better players, spend more money, pay bigger wages, but there's often a hell of a lot of sorting out in the summer to be done very, very quickly to get the high earners and the high value players out and then replace them and leverage that advantage before anybody else can kind of catch up, which, let's be honest, takes 18 months, 2 years for them to catch up. You've got to move quickly if you are a newly relegated team. And Burnley did, because when the window closes, I've got maybe 1 or 2 out here, 21 out, 16 in, and the significant players in, and I always judge this by who made the most minutes this season for these squads, the top 11, basically, and those people included Maxime Esteve, Perez, Hannibal, Laurent, great signing that, by the way, Anthony, Fleming. So 6 of the top 11 appearance makers in terms of minutes played arrived in the summer. And Trafford, Cullen, Roberts, Egan Riley, Brownhill are the other 5. They were there already. So it's a very, very quick build. When we did the Leeds video, it was obviously a build over, 3 years, basically. You had ex-Premier League players and players bought basically across 2 summer transfer windows. This has been done in half the time and basically in 1 window, because it's only really Marcus Edwards who's going to come in January and really kind of be integrated into that first team picture. Let's jump to the 3rd of November. My God, Burnley lose a game. Millwall 1, Burnley 0. And Burnley are in their worst run of the season here. I mean, first world problems. They didn't win for a whole 4 games. This, wrong finger, is the 3rd one of those games. And you all know what I'm about to say. It is their last defeat in the EFL. Unbelievable. What have I got there? 173 days ago, that last EFL defeat. 31 games undefeated from there to go on this run and secure promotion. They've been massively, massively consistent. And here is a next key day in the next month, Boxing Day, a head-to-head game. And Burnley have been very good in head-to-heads in the games with the teams around them this season. Give or take the one against Sunderland very, very early in the season, which you can argue away with mitigating factors about chaos in squad churn, 21 and 16 in each direction. Sunderland were also on a very, very hot start there, so you can kind of explain away that defeat. Maybe the Leeds fans will explain away the defeat in the same period to them, but, swings, roundabouts, and all of that. So this is not only a head-to-head victory, and we knew already at this point it was a top 4, didn't we? It's going to turn into a top 3 and then, go figure, a top 2. But it's a great win. Sheffield United have been brilliant at home up to that point. And would you believe, defensively, there wasn't actually that much in it between the top 3 at this point. But Burnley are about to go into hyper mode. And if you're looking for something extraordinary from this championship season, it is Burnley's defensive record, really. When we look back, that's going to be the thing, isn't it? And this is the first of 12 games in a row where Burnley kept clean sheets. They do not concede a goal for the next 12 games, which is absolutely outrageous. Yes, you can talk about that there are 5 0-0 draws in 7 games in this run of 12. Yes, you can talk about the financial advantages that Burnley have from recently being in the Premier League and being in receipt of a year 1 parachute payment. But regardless of any of those things, it is blooming hard to keep the ball out of your goal for 12 consecutive games. In fact, it is extraordinary. And we must. I know, football fans will just argue over anything and that this is better and that is better. Let's, with all humility, say 12 clean sheets in a row. Whether you like Burnley or not, whether you like the way they play, whether you like Scott Parker, whether you like clubs from the Northwest, whether you like Burnley's badge, I don't know. Let's have enough humility to acknowledge that is tremendous, isn't it? So off they go on this massive run. But they've got to do one more thing, Burnley. They've got to turn the draws into wins, haven't they? If they are going to get past Sheffield United, and they're kind of Burnley, they're in the background for a lot of the season. But let's go to the 4th of Feb, where Burnley beat Oxford 1-0, and they frankly enter beast mode, and the draws turn to wins. Prior to this game, Burnley had a win percentage of 50 and a draw percentage, listen to this, 43%. I think it was the first 30 games that took us to prior to that game. This game onwards, Burnley's win percentage is 78% and their draw percentage drops to 21%. So from this moment onwards, after the transfer window has closed and we go into the real business mode, where Scott Parker really seems to earn his money. Actually, that's not true because he front-loaded the points, didn't he, at Bournemouth, and he won the playoffs. So it was completely untrue. I'll take that back. At Fulham. So from this point onwards, Burnley's win percentage went up 28% and their draw percentage went down 22%. So they hit form, became a winning machine at the perfect time of the season. And there was some slippage elsewhere. Obviously, Sunderland do kind of tail off now. Remember, they lost, there was 2 key head-to-head games involving Leeds, and Sunderland just, it goes from a 4 to a 3. And this game here, Coventry 1, Burnley 2, is highly significant because out of nowhere, seemingly, Burnley went top of the table. Because this day here, 5th of April, also coincides. It's the last game of Leeds' slip, which is not a collapse because they've also been promoted. Leeds 1 win in 6 up to the 5th of April. And it's the start. We didn't know about it. In fact, it hadn't even started at the point that game finishes because it's a 12:30 kickoff. And then at 3 p.m, Sheffield United go and lose at Oxford and then proceed to collapse over that week and score 0 points over rounds 40, 41 and 42. So Burnley were perfectly positioned at the back end of the Leeds slip and at the start of the Sheffield United to collapse. They've turned the draws to wins. They don't concede any goals. They don't lose any games. Here they go into promotion position. There was one more job to do. You all know what it was. It was to finish the deal in the head-to-head there against Sheffield United. Leeds had given themselves a bit more leverage, hadn't they? They'd kind of got in front with the 2 head-to-head wins, one over Sheffield United and one over Sunderland. Slipped, but then got themselves back into pole position with 4 straight wins. Burnley just needed to get this one done, and they did. and got themselves over the line at Turf Moor on Easter Monday. To great celebrations, and congratulations if you are a celebrating Burnley fan, subscriber of this channel. And if you're just an interested fan, here are the kind of key points on how they did it. Like Leeds, they went for a manager who had been promoted from this league not only once before, but twice before. Again, I don't want the chasms in English football to be so great that all you need to do is literally, and we'll use the word parachute twice here, parachute in a previously promoted manager with a parachute team. It needs to be harder than that, but that's not Burnley's fault. That's not Leeds' fault. That's part of a bigger conversation that we've been having for 10 years about the chasms in English football. And as Burnley and Leeds are about to find out, they are now going to be at the bottom of another chasm in the Premier League. None of them are right. They all need to go. But hey, that's the reality we live in. And we can talk about it and hopefully change it. And maybe one day things will be better once again. They had to sort out that first window, didn't they? Which they did pretty well, actually, when you consider how chaotic it was. Yes, they had lots of assets. And this kind of parlays into the conversation of what you have to do when you go up. That even if you're Ipswich Town now and you're being heavily criticised for spending lots of money by championship standards and being promoted, you now come down with assets that you can either trade or use to get yourself promoted back. And Luton weren't in a position to do that with their run up from the National League and the fact that money needs to go into a new stadium. Look where they are, look where Burnley are, and watch what Ipswich do, and we'll see if that all bears out. Again, I reiterate, I don't want it to be that boring, but Burnley did do a good job in that first window. And we just got to talk about the goalkeeper, haven't we? I know defending is a team pursuit, and it comes down to the pattern of play, the structure, and Scott Parker often talked about distances and numbers of players behind the ball in certain situations. So, yes, it's not just Trafford. It is Pires and Egan Riley and Estev and Roberts, the whole back five, and presumably shading in front from the likes of Cullen. But let's give James Trafford some credit. I think he should be the Championship Player of the Year on Sunday when those awards are given out. And individually, I mean, even recently, that save at Watford, the double penalty save in the... Should have lost that game against Sunderland, shouldn't they? And he's just been fantastic. So it helps if you have an extraordinary performer. And look, I've seen Leeds fans say to me, oh, well, if Trafford had been playing for Leeds, we'd have got 110 points. Maybe. You can run the argument in reverse, though, can't you? If you have one team that scored loads of goals and one team that's conceded none, can we say if Dan James had played for Burnley, would they have 110 points? Because they'd still have the defence and they'd have another... What's Dan James got? Another 25 goal contributions or something like that, hasn't he? So you can run the argument in both ways. And football fans will always want to be top dog and argue about anything. Again, how you're promoted, the key word in that is promoted, isn't it? So let's mention the head-to-heads as well, because in games against Leeds and Sheffield United, Burnley got 10 points. So they topped that little mini-league. They won at Elland Road. They drew the home game. They didn't concede a goal. They won at Bramall Lane and they beat. So they did double over Sheffield United. So basically 9 points from wins and 1 from a pretty dull 0-0 draw. Which brings us into the final part of the conversation, doesn't it? Were Burnley boring? Were they too defensive? Again, I'll point to that word there, promoted. And look, obviously, what have Leeds scored? 89 goals. Were Leeds more exciting to watch than Burnley? Yes. Okay. Were Burnley too defensive? No. They've got an extraordinary defensive record and they've got 94 points. And as I said, from 4th of February, they've won 11 out of 14 games. They are 4th for possession. They are 5th for goals. And at time of recording, they have scored 1 more goal than Sheffield United, 3 more goals than Sunderland. There's Coventry, Middlesbrough, and Norwich who skew highly on that, who are, kind of lower down in the table. yeah, okay, you can then go into stuff about chances created and shots taken, and Burnley start to go down in the middle for that. But look, I don't know. You tell me, what is too defensive? Did they sit behind the... But look, I support a team that had Mick McCarthy managing them for 6 years, who literally sat in a low block and didn't play a lot of football, or they tried to control games by stopping the other team and sort of the odd counter attack and set plays. Was that team too defensive? Yes. I don't think this Burnley team was too defensive. Yes, they were defensive. Were they too defensive? That's a debate you lot can have in the comments, and I'm sure we'll get some very motivated reasoning, particularly from fans of teams that have either scored more goals than Burnley or are below Burnley in the table, and there's a bit of jealousy, or maybe one that's above Burnley in the table and, you know, wanting to have that battle of who's actually the best team. Well, the title race is still on, and both Leeds and Burnley could score 100 points. So I think we are splitting hairs here. Two excellent performances this season, and that is my take on how Burnley did it. What I shall do here, if you haven't watched it already, is link up there my video on how Leeds did it. You can have a look at both of them and make your decision on some of the things we've discussed, and we will find out who's actually going to win the championship with 2 games to go, and as I say, still the opportunity for both sides to get themselves 100 points. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. That's my take on how Burnley did it.